once again, thank you all for coming today to our 8th annual Marquette Real Estate Chicago Leadership Breakfast. So today's event, as many of you know who have been here before, is a little bit different. While there are hundreds of events out there ready to talk about the economy and interest rates and market cycles and dynamics, there are very few focused on the incredible real estate leaders who are moving markets themselves. That is what today's event is all about. And if you're here to talk about macroeconomics or hear predictions about what the Fed will do next, you're going to be disappointed. And Willy, I don't see anybody leaving, so I think we're good. Besides, I should mention this, tomorrow Willy's actually hosting his favorite guest, Dr. Peter Linneman, to talk just about that stuff, live at the New York Stock Exchange. So for today, I know you'll enjoy meeting the man behind the curtain. Willy Walker is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Walker & Dunlop. Under Mr. Walker's leadership, Walker & Dunlop, which was started in 1937 by his grandfather, Oliver Walker, along with Laird Dunlop, and later led by his father, Mallory, has grown from a small, family-owned business to become one of the largest commercial real estate finance companies in the United States. Walker & Dunlop was listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and in the first 10 years as a public company, saw its shares appreciate more than 800%. The firm was also number 17 in Fortune's 2017 list of fastest growing public companies, and has been named a best workplace for 8 of the last 11 years by the Great Place to Work Institute. Mr. Walker received the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award in 2011, and was named Financier of the Year in 2017 and 2020 by Commercial Mortgage Observer. Mr. Walker is an avid runner, skier, and cyclist, and has run the Boston Marathon in a time of 2 hours and 36 minutes. A native of Maryland, today you'll find him based in Denver, but he also spends time in Sun Valley, all, of course, while he's not taking part in his more than 100 days of travel each year. We're probably on day like 76, Willy, I would guess. He's also the host of the wildly popular Walker Webcast, a weekly series started during the heart of the global pandemic that has turned into a can't-miss watching and listening opportunity for our industry's top professionals around the country. If you haven't listened yet, please do. You will learn more in that hour than almost anywhere else, and you'll enjoy every minute. Mr. Walker received his master's degree in business administration from Harvard and a bachelor's degree from St. Lawrence University, and he serves on the board of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Foundation. He is also a member of the Real Estate Roundtable. Please join me in welcoming Willy Walker.
That marathon time, I knew that the Chicago Marathon here day before yesterday, and that marathon time is really ancient history, so that was 1996. So let's put that in. No, 95, excuse me. So let's put that in perspective.
So, 20.
30.
Let's not go there. This many years later is still impressive, though. Really, I think is the point. Well, thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to have you. Let's dive right in. So your company, Walker & Dunlop, was founded by your grandfather. Your father later ran it, and so you kind of grew up around the Washington D.C. area, right? And what's interesting to me though is that it sounds like you never were really interested in real estate growing up. In fact, you started your career working for a commercial airline in Argentina, which I'm not sure how many people actually know that. What led you to take that early leap in your career path?
As it relates to WD, I never ever wanted to work for one. I had no interest in the commercial real estate industry. I watched my grandfather run the company. I remember on Sundays my dad would go down to the office and I'd run around the office and sort of thought it was pretty cool, like what dictaphones were and that they like speaking with tape recorders and then come in on Monday morning and type it out. So the younger people in this room, that actually happens. But when I'll just jump through some things really quickly, Andy, here, because when I was graduating from undergrad at St. Lawrence, I was going to go to Merrill Lynch and work in their analyst training program. And a family friend was a career foreign service officer in Washington, D.C., and he had been named by Ronald Reagan to be U.S. ambassador to Paraguay. And Ambassador Tal asked me, what are you doing next year? And I said, I'm going to go to Merrill Lynch, I'm going to be an investment banker. And he was like, why don't you go to Paraguay? And to be totally honest with you, I had no idea where Paraguay was on the map. And then I was like, where? And he's like, come to Paraguay. And to my parents' great credit, And I think that this move by my parents when I was, 22 years old sort of has defined a lot of my career. But my parents said you can always go to Wall Street and work for Merrill Lynch. You can't always go to Paraguay at the invitation of the U.S. ambassador. Go. And their willingness, quite honestly, to say, go spread your wings. And also, I would say, having the ability to come home. The ability to go and take risks and know that there's going to be a roof over your head and a warm meal is a huge advantage that many of us are gifted to have. Many people don't have that. I remember getting out of business school and thinking about what job I was going to take and having friends that say, I've got student debt up to here, I've got to go work for McKinsey or JP Morgan. They can't do that entrepreneurial thing because they have to go and make the money for it. I was blessed that my parents said, just go do it. And if everything works out, great. If it doesn't work out, you can always come home and kind of retool. And so I went to Paraguay and I went down with my bags packed for 3 months and I stayed for 3 years. And that experience in Paraguay was such an incredible, it was so far away, it was so foreign. I had to learn I took Spanish in high school and I got a C- on my Spanish 3 exam and said, I'll never speak that godforsaken language again. And today I speak Spanish all the time. And I love that language and I love the culture and I love Latin America. But fast forwarding through to how I got back to the family company, I've gone out and done a lot of other stuff. I'd done investment banking, I'd done venture capital, I'd done private equity, I'd started an airline in Argentina. I'd been out and I'd seen a lot. And my wife at the time and I had our first child in London. And all of a sudden this homing device kind of went off for me. I lived in Latin America for almost a decade, lived all over the United States, and this sense of get back to family just kind of went, boom, time for you to go home. And I looked at a number of different opportunities as it relates to what I do, and I was on the board of Walker & Dunlop at the time, and I did a strategic offsite with my dad and his management team. And I was sitting there looking at this small, it was 46 people in the firm, it was one office. And I looked at all these opportunities to grow and expand the company. And as I was leaving the Marriott Hotel right next to Dulles Airport to fly back to London, I turned to my dad and I said, I think I could help you with Walker & Dunlop. And his response to me was, I've always known you could, I just didn't think you had any interest in doing so. And so I came back to Walker & Dunlop, if you will, in 2003. And the one thing that I wasn't going to do was go back to Walker & Dunlop and just kind of keep Walker & Dunlop what it was. And so that then got me going on, how are we going to grow this and what are we going to do? And you have to remember, Andy, that at that time, we had no capital, we had no brand, and we were competing in a national and global market where capital and brand were really fundamental to being able to survive and thrive. And so building the firm at the time I joined the firm, my dad and I estimated the firm was worth about $25 million, and our market cap surpassed $5 billion at the end of last year. So to take a $25 million company and turn it into a $5 billion company, all the different steps as we built that company up has been both a lot of fun, required a lot of work, and most importantly, it's required an amazing team that's working every day.
You did an interview with Biz Now a few months ago where you said something about when you were coming home to Walker & Dunlop. I had an immediate desire to transform the company so that no one could ever say, Willy just inherited this company and stepped into his father's footsteps. So why was that so important?
That's just my insecurity. That's just my insecurity.
So you're human.
I'll never forget it, Andy. I went to a Mortgage Bankers Association my first Mortgage Bankers Association annual convention. It was in San Diego, California. This was January of 2024. I joined in 2004. I joined the firm in 2003. And I was sitting there talking to somebody who was from, I can't remember if it was UBS or some big bank. And he's sitting there and I'm introducing myself and I'm Willy Walker and this and that. And then all of a sudden, about halfway through the conversation, he matches up my name tag with the name of my firm. And he goes, oh, you're one of those lucky location, silver spoon guys who's just come to grown up in a family firm and was running a family firm. And I have always sort of taken just like because of your last name you got this job and you're running the firm. And so it's my own insecurity that said that no one will ever sit there and say I got the job because of my last name, and that I've shown that I have the capability to grow the firm and do well. There are plenty of people, including my ex-wife, who would probably tell you maybe I took that a little bit far. It's been, I think that one of the things that's been so exciting about it is that there's always been a new challenge. There's always been a group of people who said sort of, WD can't do this, you can't do that. And the team has had the ability to look at these big objectives and say, sort of, why can't we? Why can't we go build a scale investment sales platform? Getting into the investment sales business, just as an aside, we decided to enter that business in 2015. That business is, and there are many in the room, filled with incredibly talented brokers who need big brands and have great client relationships. So when you all of a sudden say, hey, we're Walker & Dunlop, we want to enter the investment sales business, it's like, why would someone leave CBRE or JLL to come to Walker & Dunlop? Like in 2015, they'd be like, why? Like, I'm not going to go be the first person in. So you have to figure out how you're going to do that, how you build the brand, how you build the team, and how you get Brian Mulder, who was the first CD broker to jump from CD to Walker & Dunlop, to say, that's the platform I want to be on. Subsequently, many CD brokers have come on. But the point is, you've got to have something that gets someone as talented as Brian Mulder to say, that's the platform I want to go to.
Yeah. So you have a really great track record and a famous culture as a company, of course, but and you once said, I found this really interesting, when it gets to change management, I think the best way to get someone to do something they don't want to do is to personalize it for them. Can you expand that a little bit more? Because clearly you had to go through a lot of change management in the last 20 years.
That one, I think there are kind of two sides to that, Andy. It's a really good question. I think the first one is that we have a great advantage. We're only a firm of 1,400 people. So, I mean, I was just talking about CD for when I have immense respect for Bob Simon, who's the CEO of CD. And Bob and I were together the week before last in Dallas. And he said, how many employees do you have at WD these days? And I was like, 1,400. He's like, I've got, I can't remember the number that Bob put out there. It's like, somebody in the room knows. It's like 178,000 employees or something. And I'm just sitting there thinking about Bob's role and my role and how he does what he does. One other thing that he did say that I thought was probably one of the greatest compliments I've ever had is that we don't watch anyone other than you. Which is pretty cool. That the CEO of CD would be there. Like, we watch what WD's doing because of how you go about doing it. But the thing that I have the great advantage over someone like Bob is that for Bob to personalize anything with CD is really difficult. Right? It's just too big, too many people. Not that Bob doesn't do amazing things to get the entire team at CD moving in a certain direction, but when we've acquired 16 companies at Walker & Dunlop, and one of the big things that I've been very, very focused on is culture. Because if you're acquiring a company, the first company we acquired, the first question from the senior management team was, how do we know the people that we're bringing in? How do we know how they were trained? And then also from a credit standpoint, how do we know the strength of the credit portfolio? I said, well, let's go diligence it, which we did. But the cultural, in that acquisition of Column Guarantee from Credit Suisse in 2009, you were bringing on a group of people who had been inside of a big investment bank. What's their culture like? And one of the things that we were really good at doing was if somebody's way of acting was outside of our norm, we had to socialize that behavior. And the easiest way to do that was for me to have a personal engagement with that person to tell them what WD stands for and how we go about doing it. And the one thing that has been very helpful over time is there are clearly people who joined WD who kind of haven't fit into the culture. And instead of delegating those hard discussions, like we acquired a company in 2012, we had a really, really, really great, successful banker inside of that company, but he just kept kind of stepping over the line. He had kind of, if you will, using a tennis analogy, he had football after football. And HR had sent him all the notifications and all this stuff, and he just wasn't figuring out what the culture was. And so rather than say to somebody, his boss, like, you go take care of this, I hopped on an airplane, I flew to where he was, I went out to lunch with him, and I said, here's the deal. I need you to change your behavior, and if you don't, I personally will call up the CEOs of JLL, Marquette, and CBRE, and find you a job. Like literally, I'll introduce you to them, not that they weren't already recruiting him, okay? So he knew exactly who they were. The point was, I was willing to say to him, unless your behavior changes, this isn't, I'm happy to see you go. And it wasn't done in a threatening way, although I'm sure he walked out of lunch saying, oh my God, like, really? And to his great credit, subsequently, we haven't had footfalls.
Personalized.
Yeah.
Leading from the front too, from a culture standpoint, it seems to really stick out to me from that story. How do you feel about culture though at the other levels? How do you make sure that the culture is maintained, or culture keepers, if you will?
Well, you know, Zoom, first of all, I was just talking to Tim about my travel schedule, and I spend a lot of time on the road. I wish I was only traveling the number of days that you said at the beginning. And I think one of the biggest things, again, with only 1,400 people inside of WD, I can get out and see a lot of people and can engage with clients together, and they can see the way that I act. The other piece to it is the management team is growing and growing and growing. Every single member of that management team has to embody the culture and talk about things in the same, not obviously the same way. One of the things that we want to foster inside the company is a difference of opinions. I have some amazing debates with members of my senior management team about certain things. I want different opinions. I don't want to think that like what we've established has to stay ingrained and you just keep doing the same thing over and over. And at the same time, there are certain things that we have to do every single day to maintain the culture as it relates to excellence in customer service. As it relates to, one of the things, I think one of the most forceful things I say, I do a new employee orientation every quarter. And I get on a Zoom call now, used to do it face-to-face, I get on a Zoom call with people all across the country, and I talk all about the business. But the one thing that I really hammer home is that my name is on the door. It's a great honor for me to have my name on the door, and that we will do a lot of things wrong. We will make mistakes like I made yesterday, but what we will never do is do anything to hurt that brand. So we will always be honest. We will always tell the truth, and that there's no fudge factor in that. And it's not like larger firms that have great leaders want that kind of activity to happen, but they don't have that same personal connection. And so we ought to take advantage of that. We ought to use it to our benefit, to sort of say, realize you're working in a firm that you can do all sorts of things wrong, you can make mistakes, but you will never do anything to impact that brand.
The focus on the brand, I love it. So let's switch gears a little bit. You're in Chicago, the home of Sam Sal. Of course, we lost Sam earlier this year. Now, I know you've met him over the years, knew him. Could you just take a moment just to tell us about maybe a story or two?
Yeah, I got lots of Sam stories. I was actually over at Equity yesterday. First time I ever met Sam, he had a house in Sun Valley, Idaho, where I also have a house. And, but I didn't have a house back then. I was just, this is actually out of college, thinking about going to business school. And I told you I lived in Paraguay for 3 years, and I worked in the nonprofit world. And I applied to Harvard, and they said, you're in, but you need to go do a year of for-profit work before coming into the US. I called up the dean and said, where do you want me to go work? She said, I'm not going to tell you where to go work, just go work for a for-profit company. So a friend knew Sam's out and said, you want to go meet Sam? So I went over to Sam's house in Sun Valley, Idaho, and this is 1992. And I walked in, and at that time, Sam was already over married. Big figure, big person. And I walked in and said, hello, Mr. Zell. And he said, call me Sam. If you ever meet my dad, you can call him Mr. Zell, but call me Sam. And he was one of the first adults who ever sort of said to me, don't call me by my exalted title of Mr. Zell, call me Sam. And that, to many people in the room who knew Sam, that was Sam. But like, let's get through with the bullshit, let's just talk about what life is like. And so, after meeting Sam, I came out here to Chicago, met a bunch of his people, and they said, we want you to come work at Equity. But Sam said, if you come work at Equity, I don't want you to go to Harvard. Because I'm not going to go invest a year's time in you and then have you go off to business school. So if you want to come work at Equity, you got a job, but you're not going to go to Harvard. And I said, I got to go to Harvard. So I went to Sam. But we maintained a friendship throughout from there on, and I saw him in Sun Valley a lot. And Sam was just, he was a unique person. I was talking to Mark Perrell, the CEO of EQR, yesterday about it. And I asked him how things had changed since Sam's passing. And the most interesting thing was the way their board meetings go today. Many of you in the room may know David Nethercutt, who used to run EQR, who's a dear friend of mine. And Nethercutt is now the chairman of the board. And what Perel said was, our board meetings with Sam were pretty straightforward. We walked in, Sam had already reviewed everything, board meetings were super quick. It was like, do this, and if we were trying to debate on the dividend policy or what we were going to do with dividend, we'd already discussed it with Sam. So it was like, here's the board resolution, sign it. And he says, now we come into the room, and David's a great chairman, but there's a lot of conversation. There's a lot that goes on, because it's not sort of Sam's deal. And so that was Sam. That was Sam's brilliance. That was Sam's genius. And it was also the respect that everyone in the room had for Sam's incredible business acumen that said, if Sam says the dividend ought to be there, we're going there.
Now, is there anything about Sam that over the years as a leader you have thought about and it has impacted you in that way? Or maybe there's somebody else too. You could bring in another figure here.
There are lots of people who have been mentors. I wouldn't call Sam, quote unquote, a mentor to me, only because I knew Sam quite well, saw him every year at his annual conference here in Chicago, skied with him, but I never called Sam and said, I got a hard business decision to help me through it. He didn't know enough about my business. I wasn't close enough to him to ask him for that. But the one thing that I would say about Sam that I always kind of have watched is his irreverence and how he kind of got away with his irreverence. There are many people like Deb Cafaro, who runs Ventas, who's a dear friend, and Deb grew up here in Chicago and knew Sam very, very well. And Deb says that sometimes Sam would step across the line as a female, and what he would say in the room. And Sam's, I guess, brilliance and also his true care for people allowed him to kind of get away with it. But there are few people who could have kind of acted the way that Sam acted at times and got away with it. His brilliance allowed him to do that. But I watched that as it relates to how much of that sort of no BS attitude is good to a culture or bad to a culture. And it's like Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio, the way he ran things at his firm, just the clashing culture, the sort of let's peel the onion but have absolutely no bars to hold on, like how we debate this issue. That's a really difficult thing to do and keep people together, keep people respecting one another. So you obviously want to have hard, straightforward conversations about the truth. You want to get to the truth. You want to get to the real outcome. You don't want the rumor mill happening inside your office. And at the same time, there are very few people who kind of don't, who can cross the line like Sam did at times and still maintain the culture.
Yeah. Well, switching gears a little bit, another Chicago luminary, and you have a lot in common. And that's Oprah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you just heard it here. That is the first time in my entire life that anyone has ever compared me to Oprah. I mean, what an incredible. So before you go on from that, the Walker webcast has been viewed by 10 million. It's been viewed 10 million times now. It has gone so far beyond what I ever conceived it would do. It's an incredible joy to me to do it on a weekly basis. And it's done amazing things for our brand. But I am a complete hack at this in comparison to anybody who is an actual. I'm going to be on CNBC tomorrow morning with my friend David Faber, and Faber constantly kind of pokes me of saying, just stay in commercial real estate and not come over to the news side of things. They are all professionals. I am a Monday morning quarterback trying to look at what they all do and just ask good questions of people.
I disagree. Well, let's dive into this a little bit because I think this is fascinating. So, we actually, in our first email promoting having you here today, we called you the Oprah of real estate. And we meant that in a very positive way, by the way. There's something about everybody in this room has something in common, yourself included. We're all kind of these real estate nerds. Our identity is caught up in the work that we do within real estate. And yet, we're all curious about the rest of the world and about other things that are going on. And you seem to have caught lightning in a bottle, representing us kind of as the everyman, but going beyond just these interviews, talking about the economy and things like that, but talking about things that go well beyond it with some of these other leaders that you have on your webcast. My sense is that that's a little bit part of the success. Was that intentional from the beginning. I mean, take us back to COVID and the first Walker webcast and where it's gone from there.
So Andy, it's, first of all, the Walker webcast was completely a product of the times. It wasn't like I sat around with a group of people at Walker Dunlop and said, we need to reach out to our clients and create a new brand, let's do X. It was the Friday that the world shut down on COVID. I turned to our head of marketing, Susan Weber, and said, we need to talk to our clients to tell them what's going on in the world. Let's do a webinar next week. It's Friday. We need Monday and Tuesday to kind of get our stuff together. Let's just put it on a Wednesday. She said, great, I'll get it done. So we set up to have a webcast on Wednesday, and over the weekend I sat around and said, the world doesn't really want to listen to either me or Walker Dunlop banker or broker give their opinion on markets. Let's get a third party who can talk about it. And there was a macroeconomist, there is, he's still alive, named Sri Kumar, who I'd watched on CNBC numerous times and was really, really good on interest rates. And so I called up Sri over the weekend. I said, hey, Sri, you want to join me on Wednesday? We're going to have a call with our clients. And he said, sure, I'd love to join you. And so on Wednesday at 12:30, right after the world shut down, Sri came on with me. And I think we had 4,000 people dial in. And we actually had to expand our Zoom licenses because we're only a company of 1,400 people. So we had to expand our Zoom licenses, and everyone listened in. And as everyone remembers in the room, we were all on webcasts. I mean, every company, Tim's former employer, Willy, had to have had 5 webcasts that week on all sorts of things all over the globe. And so we did that Wednesday, and we had about 4,000 people come in, and then Susan said, you want to do another one? And I said, well, yeah, let me see whether my friend Barry Sturman wants to join me. So I called up Barry and said, hey, Barry, you want to come on next week and talk about the markets and this and this? He said, sure. So Barry came on the following Wednesday, and we had 9,000 people. And and of course, remember, this was not like I was doing a great job or that my guests were incredible. Everyone in the world was just desperate for information on anything. So after 9,000 people came on for Barry, I was like, okay, now we got to do this again. And I think that there are 2 things, let me just fast forward through it. I think there are 2 things that were really important. One was lots of other people moved their web calls around. Let's do one next week on a Monday. Let's do another one on a Friday. Let's get this guest or whatever else. By going Wednesday and sticking with Wednesday, it was super helpful to saying, hey, that Walker thing, it happens on Wednesday. Okay? The fact that it was the Walker webcast on a Wednesday at 12:30 also helped from a branding standpoint. And then the other thing was not to bring on Walker and Dunlop employees, not to bring on my colleagues, but to continue to go outside and bring in external voices. Every one of our competitors had come listen to I've thrown CD under the bus too much today, so let me back off on CD. Like, come listen to the JLL bankers talk about what they see. It was promotional. It was like, you want to listen to the JLL banker because the JLL banker knows what's going on in the markets. I was like, let's not promote Walker and Dunlop. Let's get a third party to come on and talk about the markets. That sort of giving of information rather than trying to market W&D was super helpful to it gaining traction. And then the final thing was going outside of commercial real estate. There's only so many conversations with Peter Linneman and Barry Sternreich that people want to listen to. And I do think that that's, Sam Zell never spoke at a Walker and Dunlop event. And one of the reasons Sam never spoke at a Walker and Dunlop event was I always felt that our clients didn't really want to listen to somebody who was more successful than them, telling them how they made their money. So Sam never came and said, this is what we've done at equity and this is why I'm a multi-billionaire, right? You don't want someone to have all the ideas or whatever else. Everyone in the room is super successful. They want to say, show me ideas or where I might be able to take my firm. And so on that, we went outside of commercial real estate, and particularly during the pandemic, I went and got doctors on. Then I got, when George Floyd was murdered tragically, I brought on the head of Howard University. I brought on civil rights leaders to talk about how the world needs to deal with this, be transparent in it, communicate on it. It was very interesting to me, honestly, after the George Floyd murder, how many of my public company CEOs called me to ask about the transparency of communication that we were having both inside of Walker and on the webcast. Because in some instances, they didn't even know how to start. And that's not a criticism at all. It's just, be careful about not having enough openness and transparency on issues that are as important as race relations in the United States, that you have something like that happen and you don't even know what the first word is. And then we had, Katie Ledecky when she was heading off to go to the Olympics, and how is she training. So it kind of went off in a lot of different areas. What ends up happening from a viewership standpoint is whenever I have, so Linneman last time was 265,000 views. A typical, like Mark Zandi came on, about 100,000 views. So those where it's like hard numbers, macroeconomics, where are interest rates going, lots of people come in. When I had Ginny Rometty, who was the former CEO of IBM, come on 3 weeks ago, Ginny's been watched, I think, 55,000 times, 60,000 times.
One of your best interviews.
Ginny was amazing. She's just such her track record at IBM is bad. She had a negative 7% total shareholder return in her time at IBM. But I think as you read Ginny's book and look at what had happened at IBM during her tenure, she actually saved the company. And I don't know enough about Lou Gerstner and Sam Palmisano, but really what you got a sense of was that Gerstner really changed the firm. Palmisano, who's, by the way, the person who introduced me to Ginny, so I'm not trying to in any way criticize Sam. He's an incredible person who was an incredible CEO of IBM. But at the end of Sam's time, he was using a lot of retained earnings to buy back stock and push the stock price, not from a top-line growth standpoint, but from a bottom-line earnings standpoint. And we all know that that game ends at some point if you're not getting the top-line growth. And so Ginny took the top line of IBM from $101 billion in annual sales to 60. She cut businesses like chip manufacturing and just exited laptop manufacturing. She sold that off. And so Ginny really scaled IBM down, I think, in a move that then got IBM positioned to do the growth that it's in right now. And history will look at her as, quote unquote, not the greatest CEO at IBM as far as total shareholder return, but I think she is a CEO doing an amazing job of retooling IBM and getting it set for the growth that it's going through right now.
Let's keep on with Ginny, actually, because during that interview, which I highly recommend everybody in the room. So her book is called Good Power, Positive Change, Leading Positive Change in Our Lives, Working World. And so you guys started talking during that conversation about something that we all face, which is risk, and specifically career risk, I think is what she was kind of mentioning. I noted that she said how she thinks about risk. It kind of helped her, she associated it with growth instead of the potential downside. And I thought that was fascinating, kind of countercyclical, if you will, right? How do you think about risk? Do you think about it in the same way, about growth? Or do you think about it differently, as a leader, as a person?
So the thing, and it's a really good question, because if you look at Ginny Rometty's background, she had a very tough childhood. Her father left the family when she was 16 years old and left her mother with no money, reliant upon family members who really didn't have any money to help support them. And Ginny talks about it, the scene where her father left the family and basically said to her mother, and was pleading with him not to leave and leave them with nothing. The father said, I don't care what you do, I don't care about you, I don't care about the kids, and for all I care, you can work on the street. Ginny heard her father say that to her mother when she was 16 years old. So when you have that experience, at least in my take of someone who has that scathing personal experience, and then living literally on welfare for the next 2 years until she went to Northwestern, you would think that someone with that background would be quite risk averse, that she saw everything in her life literally walk out the door, and that would make her try and just work from a position of strength levels and not take any risks. And she talks about some of the career risks she took as she moved up in the ranks at IBM, and when they asked her, for instance, to move into consulting, where IBM didn't have a consulting business, and they said, you're an engineer, let's move you over to the consulting business. And just moving inside of IBM, from being in the engineering group to being in the consulting group, was a big move for her from a career standpoint. But she talks about her husband giving her the strength to be able to do that. But I do think that those early childhood experiences weigh on people. And I will tell you that I will never forget when Walker and Dunlop almost went under in the real estate crisis in 90, 91. And I watched my father just trying to, the firm at the time had gotten as big as 150 employees, and they just expanded out into leasing, and they had an Atlanta office, it was Washington, Atlanta, and, everything ended in 1990, and commercial real estate was a massive panic in 90 and 91, and it was funny because I thought my father went gray overnight because of the stress he was under in 1990, 91. I now understand it was just genetics. And that his going gray was actually genetically enhanced, not because of the stress, or maybe it was a combination of both. But I watched my dad go through that, and I sort of said, I will never, ever put myself or a company that I have at that kind of risk. And it wasn't that my dad had put the company in a bad, risky position. It's that it wasn't big enough to endure that downturn. One of the reasons why we today at Walker Dunlop have a $130 billion servicing portfolio is because I joined Walker Dunlop when it was $3.5 billion, and I said, that's the steady income stream. That's the thing that no matter what's going on in the outside markets, continues to turn on the lights. That's what allows us to endure cycles, and we are in an inherently cyclical business. So today, as we sit here and see our transaction volumes being impacted by the overall macro economy, that $130 billion servicing portfolio will kick off somewhere north of $300 million of EBITDA. It's a really nice place to be.
What do you think is the biggest risk you've taken as CEO in leading the company?
Oh gosh, there's not enough time. I think the biggest specific risk I ever took was we were acquiring a company called CW Capital from Fortress, the private equity firm. And I'd done the deal with Wes Edens, who actually runs the Milwaukee Bucks. Yeah, Wes and I did the deal. And I didn't think I was going to bring up Wes Edens in this conversation, and here we are talking about the owner of the Bucks. So Wes and I had done the deal. Fortress owned CW, and we literally did the deal over a handshake. I went to his office in New York, we talked about it. He'd been told they got to sell CW to me. I wanted to buy CW. We got the deal done, literally on a handshake. Then the deal team between Fortress and W&D started working on it, and I'd not been able to meet anyone on the management team at CW. Nobody. And so as we're getting down to the end of the deal negotiations, there were 3 really big bankers at CW that were critical to the value of the franchise. And so I went to the lawyers and said, we need a force majeure clause in the purchase agreement that says that if any one of those 3 leaves, I get the ability to back out of this deal. And of course, Fortress looked at me and said, that's on you, not on us. So as you can imagine, lawyers went back and forth, and finally I called up Wes. I said, Wes, I can't jump into this. The 3 bankers, or these huge bankers, are like X amount of revenues. And Wes said, really, the deal is either take it as it is and take that risk, or don't take that risk. So I went to my board and basically said, here's like 60% of revenues out of these 3 big bankers, and I think we ought to move forward with the deal without having them sign up to employment agreements. And we knew the risk we were taking, and it was a very big risk. And the day we announced the deal, because we were a public company back then, the day we announced the deal, one of our big competitors threw $10 million signing bonuses in front of all 3 of them and said, no questions asked, walk across the street, you can come work with us. And on the day we announced the deal, I had chartered a plane to fly from Washington to the 3 cities where those 3 bankers were, and meet with each one of them face to face and say, I know this deal has just been put in front of you, I want you to stay at Walker & Dunlop, and please don't leave. And I did not know when I had all that set up that they were all each going to receive $10 million signing bonuses that day from one of our competitors. And I honestly finished that day saying, I may have made the biggest mistake in my entire career. Because if 1, 2, or 3 of them had walked out the door with those signing bonuses, I just paid $260 million for this company and had the 3 big revenue sources walk out the door. Fortunately, not only did all 3 of them stay, all 3 of them are still at Walker & Dunlop, and all 3 of them are 3 of our best bankers. But that was, and oh, by the way, we didn't match what that competitor put on the table. And so that's one of the other things that's interesting about the culture and the people, is that they didn't want to leave their team that was coming over from CW as it relates to underwriters and closers and their analysts and their colleagues. And they knew that if they took those signing bonuses, they were leaving to go to another platform where they'd have to kind of reconstitute themselves. So there was a little bit of built-in advantage to us of that they didn't really want to leave CW coming to W&D. And at the the same time, it was tough. And fortunately, when we closed the deal on September 6, 2013, 2012, they were all there. They're all still with us today, and they've all done incredibly well at what they're going to do. But that was probably the most specific risk. There are lots of other risks that we've taken, but that was the most specific to a deal.
Unbelievable story.
But just one quick thing on that. If you want to grow the way that we've grown, you have to be able to size and take those types of risks. If I backed away from that, that deal doubled the size of Walker Dunlop. That deal turned out to be one of the greatest deals we've ever done. We've done 16. I think out of the 16, one has been an abject failure.
What did you learn about that one? What was different?
That one, I would say culture. We misread the culture. And so when we brought over the team, there was just culture clashes, and it just didn't work. And so we had to go and retool the entire company. And it was difficult, and it was painful. But look, out of 16, one goes, and by the way, goes bad. We're still in that business today. We've retooled it. We've invested with new people and new capital. But that was not a great deal.
Yeah, wow. I'd like to switch gears a little bit. I don't think we can have a good conversation without touching on something you have spoken a lot about recently, which is AI. Now, if we go back to a couple of your webcasts, I know at your summer conference, this is something that's really on your mind and probably should be on the minds of everyone in this room if it isn't already. Now, not a lot of people know that back in 2019, you actually invested in a company called Nodo, and since then you've invested
Based here. I know there's a Chicago-based company.
So tell us more about your evolution of thinking about AI and what advice you have for everybody, these other leaders, to be thinking about it moving forward, what to do.
Andy, it's a tough question in the following way. I was walking with my dad on Saturday. I told Tim, my parents came out to watch our youngest son play in the football game last weekend. And my dad and I were walking, and my dad was on this big riff about AI and how important AI was and this and that. I said, Dad, the one thing that you need to understand is how hard it is to implement. And because he was, he's reading the New York Times about something that's going on at ChatGPT or Microsoft or whatever else, and it's sort of like the distance between the lip and the cup as it relates to actually using AI and implementing AI and all these things that you read about is enormous. And there's no doubt that AI is going to change our world, it's going to change the landscape. How you implement it, how you use it. One of the things that I've consistently seen is, and we've seen over time, there are people in the room, like myself, who remember when Microsoft put out Word and Excel. There's this great sense that, Word and Excel, we're going to, do away with all those people who are math majors, undergrad, who used abacuses to do regression analyses in investment banks. Didn't do away with them at all. Just made them more capable. It made them be able to train people quicker. It allowed somebody who didn't have to use an abacus to use an Excel spreadsheet to run numbers. And all we did was see a growth in the financial services industry. So it didn't eradicate jobs. It didn't eliminate jobs. All it did was make the financial services sector grow that much faster. And so I think that one of the things that we're trying to figure out right now is if you go back to 2015, Elon Musk said in 2015 we will have autonomous vehicles by 2020, and there were all these projections that people were talking about the fact that 6 million drivers in America, truck drivers, cab drivers, delivery people, would lose their jobs. I think many people in this room remember that whole period, 2015, 2016, autonomous vehicles. They're going to be autonomous, no drivers anymore, and there's this big group of blue-collar workers who are going to lose their jobs because of autonomous vehicles. Anyone see the UPS contract that was just signed? If you're a 20-year UPS driver, you can make $175,000. Nothing's happened as far as autonomous vehicles and the impact on drivers in America. Nothing. Okay? The flip side to that is that I was with somebody in Colorado about 2 months ago talking about entry-level engineering jobs, and that many of the big employers of engineering talent out of undergrad are now looking for AI to do the role those entry-level engineers would typically have done. So you sit there and you sort of say, wow, that's a pretty big shift here. We thought that 6 million truck drivers are gonna lose their job. They're all more relevant than ever, and autonomous vehicles haven't gotten there. And at the same time, a profession that many people would think was, wow, I'm gonna get a job right out of college, I'm an engineer, I'm gonna go into one of these big firms and be an engineer. They're trying to use ChatGPT and AI to basically not eradicate those jobs, but they're doing things much more efficiently. They don't need the human demand there. We're trying to use it. I would call Enodo a machine learning company, not an artificial intelligence company.
Okay.
And there's I don't want to dive too deep down that rabbit hole, but there's a big difference between machine learning and artificial intelligence. I think the other thing, I asked ChatGPT to take the Linneman report, which is 132 pages long this quarter, and do my script for me. And let's just say it wasn't really good. And so I think that there's, it can, when we have a loan narrative that we put together to underwrite a loan, we're going to do a Walker and Dunlop, it's typically somewhere between 60 and 90 pages. They're thick, they include lots of information. What we're trying to figure out is what can we automate in that so that an analyst doesn't need to sit there and do a borrower underwriting, borrower profile, what have you. And and we are using it. The technology will take all that out. But then what you want to do is have somebody who can actually analyze the information and make a credit decision on it. And I think that that's where people think the technology will make the decision, and I don't see our world ever getting to that. I don't. You could ask ChatGPT today, what's the best stock to buy? Would any of you go buy it? I don't think so. Anyone in the room wake up in the morning and ask ChatGPT what stock to buy, and when it comes back saying NVIDIA, you go buy it? No. Human nature will tell you want to do more diligence on it. There's something that's that je ne sais quoi as it relates to I like that, I don't like that. What gets into that decision making is a lot of data. That will all be aggregated by artificial intelligence, and it will give you a suggestion, but that doesn't necessarily mean the humans are going to act on it.
It's going to be, I sense our industry is one, I wouldn't call us Luddites in the grand scheme of things, but we seem to be very slow to adopt these new technologies. So
But it's a slow industry to begin with, Andy. I don't say that. Here's the deal. Office vacancy, pre-pandemic, peak, 9.9% vacancy. Today, 13% vacancy. With all that has happened to office between 2019 and 2023, you only have 3.1% movement in actual vacancy. Remember, I didn't say occupancy as it relates to people going into the office. I'm talking vacancy and leases in office buildings. It's a slow-moving industry. The reason it's at 13% today and not 30 is because I and many people in this room have 10-year leases that we signed in 2017 that don't expire until 2027. And I'm still going to pay that throughout that period of time. So the commercial real estate industry, this is one of the things, tomorrow on CNBC, I know David Faber wants me to say something that's like, what's actionable? Like, what should people be thinking today? The commercial real estate industry is a longer-term investment horizon. People in commercial real estate always think longer, and therefore change doesn't impact them quite as quickly. But one other thing, though, to keep in mind on that, I was just listening to an analyst on the housing market, and he was talking about the fact how days inventory used to be a really interesting way to look at home builders. How much inventory are you carrying? Is it good at X amount of inventory or bad? And what his comment was, because of Zillow and Trulia and all these other search engines, the time it takes for someone to find and buy a house has shrunk dramatically.
Yeah.
So you need to change your view of home builders as it relates to inventory management, because the technology has made it that all of us are much, much more insightful home buyers. So that changes the fundamentals of how do you look at home builders. Because of the technology and the technological impact, that didn't necessarily say that Lennar now knows how to build a home more efficiently. It just means that once they build it, it gets moved quicker.
We're much more efficient in terms of being able to find it to move forward. I think we have to actually go back to, not necessarily AI, but the sense of progress, right? It kind of represents something like that. And actually, progress as it relates to leadership. And I was listening to your opening comments at your Walker and Dunlop summer conference in Sun Valley this summer, and you made a comment about younger leadership. That really, really stuck with me. So your point was that our country is in need leadership. You noted that it was not about taking pot shots at those who govern, but rather it's about progress. And you commented a little bit about, maybe you could retell these stories, but Warren Buffett and then the story about your son Charlie and the phone in Italy. The question ends up, being around, can you expand more on that idea of our country needing younger political leadership and what you think is at stake when it comes to progress for our country in that regard?
Ooh, I'm gonna get in trouble on this one. I'm gonna offend everyone in the room. Dianne Feinstein, rest her soul, died as a U.S. Senator. Tim had to step down from his job at Deloitte, forced retirement, because they sat around and said, Tim's still got tons of life left in him, and tons that he can do for Marquette as dean of the business school. Tons. But the people at Deloitte said, at a certain age, as a senior leader of the Deloitte, you need to step back. We need a new generation to come in to lead this firm. And look, I think Warren Buffett and Charlie are incredible. And power to them that at 93 and 91, they're still cranking along. I love it. It's great. I'm not in any way criticizing that. But they're also two very exceptional people. And guess what? They basically run it as their own thing. I don't think that, Berkshire shareholders know that, right? But go back to Dianne Feinstein. Go to that moment that we all saw Mitch McConnell, sorry, because on both sides of it, where Mitch McConnell froze. He's an older man. My dad will do that. That's fine. I'm not criticizing him. I just don't know that he ought to be the one as the minority leader in the United States Senate. So we've allowed for this generation of leaders to, one of my closest friends is John Hickenlooper. Hick's 70 years old. He and his wife Robin just had a baby. I love seeing Hick with his infant child. It's great. But he's 70, okay? At a certain age, you've got to sort of say, okay, game's up. But we made it so that they want to hang on forever. It's our problem. It's our problem. They love it. It's great. We don't know. These people stayed too long. And my only issue, the point that I raised about my kid, is we were in Italy, Charlie's now 19, he was probably 10, so it was almost a decade ago. And we were on a backroads bike trip, and one of the backroads guides had a new phone. And he was an American guy, and he got in his phone, and he took it out of the thing, and it was programmed for Italian. You're in Italy, a new phone, it's programmed to open up on Italian. So this guy's sitting here, and he doesn't speak Italian, so he can't get to the menu to program it to change it to English, right? And so he's sitting there kind of banging away at it, and he's trying to figure all this stuff out. And my son Charlie, who I guarantee you at 9 years old, not even today, spoke a lick of Italian, says, "Can I see that?" The guy hands him the phone, and Charlie goes, bing, 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 and hands it back to him. His mind is programmed to think like a phone. Period. He knew how to scroll out of menus and get to somewhere which would get him something that he didn't actually understood, but he knew how it was programmed to get to it. And I sat there and I said, he doesn't speak a word of Italian, and he's never seen that phone before, but his programming is to understand how the phone works. And that's the generational difference. It's the difference between me and my son Charlie. It's the difference between me and everyone in this room who's half my age. So I just think that as we are dealing with issues like AI, as we are dealing with really important issues as it relates to technology changing our world, we need leaders who understand these issues. And so I'll throw two out there of people who I have a lot of respect for on both sides of the aisle. Glenn Youngkin, who was the governor of Virginia, and Jared Polis, who's the governor of Colorado. Both of them are incredibly smart, former businessmen who are, they understand what's going on in the world. They've made investment decisions. You listen to Glenn, he was with David Rubenstein at the Economic Club of DC 2 weeks ago. And you listen to Glenn talk through how he built his cabinet. It was not going to cronies who helped get him into a position of leadership in the Republican Party and being governor of Virginia. He hired a headhunting firm that went out and got him the very best administrators from across the country, and he recruited them to the state of Virginia. I'm not an investor in Virginia, I'm not a resident of Virginia. I'd like to have a team that is recruited by a recruiter to run the state as the best it possibly can be. That's what we need. We need that kind of excellence in our country.
I assume we shouldn't get you started on Condoleezza Rice. I've heard you've had some great conversations about
she's amazing, and I'd love to see her. I asked her point blank when I interviewed her whether she would run, and she said, no, I've got other things, Connie's not gonna run, there's not a chance of it. She's loving her life, but you get someone like her, where she and I dove in for an hour on all of these issues. She not only has the brain power to do it, she has the experience to do it, and she's also made mistakes that she's willing to admit. That shouldn't be a quality that's so thinly seen in politics. If Connie Rice sits there and says, I made a mistake there, there, and there, and I take responsibility for it. She, to this day, takes massive responsibility for 9/11. She was one piece of a much broader thing. She sits there and says, it happened on our watch, we take responsibility for it, and we have to learn from it. From my perspective, that's the kind of leadership you want, not somebody who steps in and says, I know everything, I got the answers, and we're going to go down this path. And woe be me to ever make a mistake. But I think we as a population also need to be more understanding of that. We need to support people like that. Because we're not very accepting of people who make mistakes in things. We like to blame. And so, look, we've sort of gotten off path on this, but I would just say that I do hope that we get a new generation of leaders into the United States, whether at the presidential level or down at the Senate, at the House, and then also at the local level. Local levels where all the action is. And the one other thing about that is we all know, mayors and governors must compromise. Senators and congressmen and women do not have to compromise. And that's a real problem. They go to DC as a red or a blue, and that's all they do. When you're a mayor, when you're a governor, you must manage your city, you must manage your state, and therefore you must compromise. And so why do we all of a sudden send people to Washington and we say, don't go compromise, yet we expect it of every mayor and every governor in this whole country?
So let's bring it home a little bit, coming back to this younger leadership and the next generation of leaders. You're at an event supporting a university. We have wonderful relationships with some of the top real estate programs around the country that are our peers as well. So what advice would you have for places like us that are trying to train that next generation? When you look out ahead, what do they need, and how can universities like us help do that?
I'm big on experiential learning. I think that one of the things that we are robbing our next generation of professionals of is having them remotely work and think that they're learning as much as they learn face to face. That mentorship process, and I know I sound very old school in saying this, but that mentorship process, those soft skills that we learn of seeing how someone introduces themselves, how they pitch their product, how they get the funding for their project, all those little soft skills you build up are so fundamental to a successful career. And if we allow our next generation to work remotely and try and learn through Zoom, they are losing so much of what it is to be a successful professional. And by the way, our economy is now 90% services. We're in a service economy. Manufacturing is 8% of the U.S. Economy today. So the people who are at Marquette in business school and focusing on real estate, they're in the services industry, engaging people in the services industry. So you want to learn services, you need to engage with people, you need to learn from people, you need to be present. And so I think that, we sit there and say, oh, it's really efficient. And look, I use Zoom, we use Zoom at Walker Knoll. I don't require employees to be back in the office 3 days a week. We're all missing something on Monday and Friday. We're all missing something on Monday and Friday. And what is apparent to me is we're plenty efficient. People learn plenty. But when that group moves to the next level, there is a skill set in there that every day that they're not engaging with mentors, they're losing something by not doing that. So I think we've got to do that. I would promote that. I would promote to anybody who is coming out of Marquette to go get a job, that if someone says to you, we're totally virtual, you can live at home and live wherever you want to. It may sound like Shangri-La. You got your dog there, you might be married, great, have fun staying at home. You are doing yourself a disservice from a career standpoint, I guarantee you. So I think that is something that you can foster and promote. And it's super important in the services industry. There's certain things that people learn that you just don't learn through a Zoom call. And by the way, Zoom is great, and you can do a whole lot, you can reach a lot of people. It's terrific. But we gotta get back to that, more of that. And then I guess the other piece to it is, sort of back to technology. Not necessarily understanding AI or being a programmer, but understanding how it's gonna impact your career. Like moving towards big numbers. Like sit there and sort of say, okay, where do I wanna be long-term as far as just kind of growth drivers in my career, okay? There's certain industries that are going the other way. There's certain that are moving towards that. You know, somebody who went to work for NVIDIA in 2011, hats off to you and congratulations on understanding how NVIDIA would grow, right? I think that's great. But find a growth industry that has good fundamentals to it. Look at what we did at Walker & Dunlop as far as focusing on multifamily. I had the opportunity to be big in office. We had the opportunity to be big in retail. We didn't do that. I had the opportunity to take risk on office loans. We didn't do that. We liked the fundamentals of multifamily housing and knew that we could create a brand and a really big market position in a market that we had some type of defendable competitive advantage. We moved to it, we built it, and now we're one of the largest, or the 6th largest provider of capital in the commercial real estate industry. Why are we the 6th largest provider of capital in the commercial real estate industry? Because multifamily is half the market. Just think about that for a second. We're the 6th largest, we sit between Citigroup and Goldman Sachs on the league tables last year as far as being providers of capital to commercial real estate. How did we do that? Because we sat there and said, multi is got growth drivers that no other commercial real estate asset class has. Let's go all in on multi and build up our competitive advantage around multi. So today we're 80% multi, 20% other commercial real estate asset classes. That's understanding a trend and going all in on the large trend. Have we done things wrong? Of course. Have we entered business we should have entered? Yeah. But you look at what we've done to grow the WD and you say, they got the macro trend right. And if you don't get the macro trend right, good luck on the smaller stuff.
Willy, final thoughts on leadership to lead us all with.
Oh, everyone in this room is a leader. You're a leader of your family, if you've got a family. You're a leader of your team, if you've got a team. You're a leader of your company, if you've got a company. You're a leader of your community, if you do anything in your community. And the first thing is to continue to lead. As in our conversation about leadership in America, we need more people who will lead, and we need more people who will lead in a way that gets our country where it needs to go. We have, as Peter Linden constantly says, do not bet against the U.S. economy. Do not bet against the U.S. economy. There are all sorts of problems. There are always problems. I literally was on a chat, just real quick, one quick anecdote before we end this. I was on a chat last week with some people who had gone to this summit in Jackson Hole called the Teton Summit. It's this great real estate conference every year, 75 next generation leaders. Okay, so I think that you age out at 45 at Teton. So I've only gone and spoken. They bring me in as the elder statesman, not an actual participant. But I'm talking to these people and they're like, there was no good news at Teton. Everyone was down. I wrote them, I said, there's always bad news at conferences. I remember sitting here in Chicago at Sam Zell's summer conference, the Marshall Bennett Classic, in 2014. The economy was roaring. Everything was good. GDP growth was in place. Interest rates were. You look at it from a macro standpoint, and Sam Zell and Barry Stern sat there for 2 days and bitched about everything on the face of the planet. Just, isn't this terrible? Isn't this awful? We're going down. We got a socialist as president, and everything's going upside down. I'm like, people always find something to complain about. It's having the fortitude to look through the noise and find the opportunity that is what is the sign of real leadership. And we need those types of people in our communities, in our companies, and in homes.